Sweat beaded on the officer's forehead as the phone receiver shook in his trembling hand. He had expected an easy collar, another notch on his belt fueled by his own ugly prejudices. Instead, the voice on the other end of the secure line belonged to a 4-star Admiral of the United States Navy, and the man sitting handcuffed in the holding cell wasn't a street thug. He was a highly decorated Tier 1 operator. This is exactly how a routine flight home turned into a career-ending nightmare. Seattle-Tacoma International Airport buzzed with the chaotic, endless energy of a Friday afternoon. Thousands of travelers dragged rolling suitcases over the polished terrazzo floors, their eyes glued to departure screens or their phones. Among the sea of rushing civilians walked Chief Petty Officer Donnelly Fisher. Donnelly moved with a quiet, deliberate grace that most people wouldn't notice, but anyone with a tactical background would instantly recognize. He didn't walk. He glided, his eyes constantly scanning his periphery, a permanent byproduct of 15 years in the United States Navy SEALs. He was exhausted. It was a bone-deep, soul-crushing fatigue that only came from a grueling 9-month covert deployment in an unforgiving desert. Right now, he wanted nothing more than to board his connecting flight to San Diego, walk through his front door, and hold his 6-year-old daughter, Chloe, for her birthday. He was dressed simply, a plain grey Henley shirt that stretched over his muscular frame, faded denim jeans, and well-worn hiking boots. Slung over his broad shoulder was a heavy olive-drab duffel bag, secured with heavy-duty brass padlocks. Inside were his personal effects, but more importantly, a locked, hardened case containing sensitive after-action reports he was personally couriering to Naval Special Warfare Command. Standing near the TSA checkpoint of Terminal B was Officer Gregory Mitchell of the Airport Police Division. Mitchell was a man who wore his badge like a crown, a thick-necked, aggressive 20-year veteran of the force. Mitchell had a notorious reputation among his peers for his instincts. In reality, those instincts were little more than deeply ingrained racial prejudices and a hunger to exert authority over anyone he deemed beneath him. Mitchell leaned against a concrete pillar, sipping a lukewarm coffee, his eyes darting over the crowd. He was looking for someone to bother, someone to justify his presence on what had been a boring shift. His gaze locked onto Donnelly. Mitchell saw a tall, heavily built black man carrying a large military-style bag. He didn't see the exhaustion of a patriot. He saw a target. He saw someone who, in his twisted worldview, looked out of place in the expedited, high-clearance TSA pre-check lane. Donnelly was holding a government-issued boarding pass, a perk of his active duty status, but Mitchell couldn't see that from 30 yards away. All Mitchell saw was an opportunity to assert his dominance. "Look at this guy," Mitchell muttered to his younger, relatively inexperienced partner, Officer Brian Jenkins. Jenkins, who was busy checking his watch, looked up. "Who? The guy in the grey shirt? What about him?" Jenkins asked, squinting. "He doesn't belong in that line," Mitchell said, his voice dripping with unfounded suspicion. "Look at the bag. Look at the way he's walking. He's casing the security setup." Jenkins frowned. "Greg, he just looks tired. Let it go." "I'm not letting anything go," Mitchell snapped, tossing his coffee cup into a nearby trash can. "I'm going to go have a little chat with our friend." Donnelly was next in line to hand his ID and boarding pass to the TSA agent when he felt a heavy hand clamp down on his shoulder. His combat reflexes flared instantly, his muscles tensing, but he forced himself to suppress the instinct to throw the hand off and neutralize the threat. He took a slow breath and turned around. "Step out of line, buddy," Officer Mitchell ordered, his chest puffed out, his hand resting casually but threateningly near his service weapon. Donnelly looked at the officer, his expression completely blank. He had dealt with warlords, terrorists, and the most dangerous men on the planet. A bullying airport cop barely registered on his heart rate monitor. "Is there a problem, officer?" Donnelly asked, his voice a calm, deep baritone. "I said step out of the line," Mitchell repeated, louder this time, intending to draw an audience. Several passengers nearby turned to watch. "You're acting suspicious, and I need to ask you a few questions." Donnelly complied, stepping out of the queue to avoid holding up the other passengers. "I assure you, I'm just trying to catch a flight home. Here is my boarding pass." Donnelly held out the paper. Mitchell snatched it from his hand, barely glancing at it. "Where are you coming from?" "Overseas," Donnelly replied simply. He wasn't at liberty to discuss his point of origin. "Overseas where? Don't play games with me, boy," Mitchell sneered, leaning in close. Donnelly's jaw tightened imperceptibly at the derogatory term, but his discipline held firm. "I am active duty military, returning from a deployment. My travel is authorized by the Department of Defense. That's all you need to know." Mitchell scoffed, looking Donnelly up and down with blatant disgust. "Right, active duty. And I'm the President of the United States. Open the bag." "No," Donnelly said firmly. Mitchell's eyes widened. He wasn't used to being told no. "What did you just say to me?" "I said no, officer." Donnelly maintained eye contact, his voice unwavering. "This bag contains classified Department of Defense materials. It is secured under federal regulations. I am traveling under Title 10 orders, and you do not have the clearance or the authority to search it." Mitchell laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Classified materials? Are you kidding me? You expect me to believe a guy who looks like you is carrying classified government secrets in a dirty duffel bag? What exactly does a person carrying classified materials look like to you, officer?" Donnelly asked, his tone dropping an octave, the subtle edge of a predator entering his voice. Mitchell's face flushed with anger. "Put your hands behind your back. Now." "On what charge?" Donnelly asked, not moving a single muscle. "Failure to comply with a lawful order, resisting an investigation, and suspicion of carrying contraband," Mitchell barked. Jenkins, the younger partner, hurried over, looking nervous. "Greg, what are you doing?" Jenkins whispered, seeing the absolute calm in Donnelly's demeanor. It was unnatural. Most people panicked or got angry. This man was completely still, like a coiled spring. "Back off, Brian," Mitchell snapped. He unclipped his handcuffs. "I said, put your hands behind your back." Donnelly knew he could disarm Mitchell and render him unconscious in approximately 1.5 seconds. But he also knew the catastrophic diplomatic and legal fallout of a SEAL assaulting a police officer in an international airport. The mission came first. The mission right now was getting these documents to Coronado. He calculated the variables. If he fought, he would be locked up indefinitely, and the chain of custody for the documents would be broken. If he complied, he could escalate the situation up the chain of command once he was behind closed doors. Slowly, deliberately, Donnelly turned around and placed his hands behind his back. Mitchell slammed the metal cuffs onto Donnelly's wrists, ratcheting them down as tight as they would go, digging into the skin. Donnelly didn't even flinch. "Greg, the cuffs are too tight," Jenkins observed, wincing at the red marks instantly forming on Donnelly's wrists. "They're fine," Mitchell growled. He grabbed Donnelly roughly by the bicep, pushing him forward. "Let's go, we're taking a walk to the precinct." The walk through the terminal was a public spectacle. Hundreds of eyes were on them. Mothers pulled their children closer. Businessmen pointed and whispered. Donnelly walked with his head held high, his posture perfect, his face an impenetrable mask of stoicism. He blocked out the stairs, retreating into the mental fortress he had built during SEER: survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. School. This was nothing compared to the mock interrogations in the mud of Camp Dawson. They reached the airport police substation, a drab, windowless set of rooms hidden behind an unmarked door near baggage claim. Mitchell shoved Donnelly into a small, brightly lit holding room containing a metal table and 2 chairs. "Sit," Mitchell commanded. Donnelly remained standing. "I prefer to stand." Mitchell kicked the back of Donnelly's knee, trying to force him down, but Donnelly's leg felt like a concrete pillar. He didn't buckle. Mitchell swore under his breath, realizing the sheer physical strength of the man he had detained. "Fine, stand. Let's see your ID," Mitchell demanded, reaching into Donnelly's front pocket and pulling out his wallet. Mitchell flipped the wallet open. Inside was Donnelly's Washington State driver's license, and right behind it, his green Common Access Card, CAC, the standard ID for active duty military personnel. Mitchell pulled it out and stared at it. It clearly stated Donnelly's name, his rank of Chief Petty Officer, and his affiliation with the U.S. Navy. For a split second, doubt flickered in Mitchell's eyes, but his pride and his prejudice quickly squashed it. "This is a fake," Mitchell declared, tossing the CAC onto the metal table. "It is a federally issued identification card," Donnelly stated calmly. "It has a microchip and a barcode. You can scan it." "I know what a fake looks like," Mitchell sneered. "I've seen guys like you before. You buy this garbage online so you can get discounts at restaurants and cut the line at the airport. It's pathetic. Stolen valor is a crime, you know." Jenkins, who was standing in the doorway, leaned in. "Greg, I don't know, man. The holograms look real, and the chip, maybe we should just scan it." "Shut up, Brian," Mitchell barked. "I know a thug when I see one. He's probably moving drugs in that bag." Mitchell pointed to the olive-drab duffel resting on the floor outside the cell. "Give me the keys to the padlocks." "I cannot do that," Donnelly said. "I am warning you, Officer Mitchell. If you attempt to open that bag, you will be violating federal espionage laws. The contents are compartmentalized and above your clearance level. My detention is already delaying a time-sensitive briefing. You need to contact your superior officer immediately." "I am the senior officer on shift right now," Mitchell lied, smiling a cruel, yellowed smile. "And I don't take orders from fake sailors. Now you can give me the keys, or I can get the bolt cutters and we can add destruction of police property to your charges when I bill you for them. If you use bolt cutters on a sealed Diplomatic Centre military pouch, the FBI will be here within the hour, and you will be in federal custody," Donnelly said, his voice entirely devoid of emotion. It wasn't a threat. It was a simple statement of fact. Mitchell hesitated. The utter confidence in Donnelly's voice was unnerving. The suspect wasn't angry, wasn't yelling for a lawyer, wasn't begging to be let go. He was issuing calm, precise warnings. "You think you're pretty smart, don't you?" Mitchell spat, pacing the small room. "You think you can come in here, use some big words and scare me off? I own this airport. You don't leave until I say you leave." Donnelly finally let a small, cold smile touch the corners of his mouth. "You don't own anything, officer. You're a man terrified of the world, hiding behind a tin badge. And you have just made the biggest mistake of your miserable life." The silence in the holding room grew heavy and oppressive. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows over Mitchell's increasingly flushed face. Donnelly's words hung in the air, not as a taunt, but as a chilling promise. Mitchell's hand twitched toward his belt. He was furious. Suspects were supposed to cower. They were supposed to respect his authority. This man was looking at him as if he were an annoying insect. "We'll see about that," Mitchell growled. He turned to Jenkins. "Go get the bolt cutters from the maintenance closet. I'm opening that bag." Jenkins stood frozen in the doorway, his eyes darting between his senior partner and the imposing, handcuffed man in the center of the room. Jenkins had been on the force for 2 years. He wasn't a bad cop, just a weak one, easily cowed by Mitchell's aggressive personality. But right now, Jenkins's gut was screaming at him that they had stepped on a landmine. "Greg, wait," Jenkins stammered, holding his hands up. "Listen to him. What if he's telling the truth? If we cut open a federal pouch without a warrant, we're both screwed. The feds don't mess around with that stuff." "He's a liar," Mitchell shouted, slamming his fist onto the metal table. "Look at him, Brian. Does he look like a Navy SEAL to you? He's a banger in a clean shirt. Go get the cutters." Donnelly shifted his weight slightly, the chains of his handcuffs clinking. "Officer Jenkins, is it?" Donnelly asked, his voice cutting through Mitchell's yelling like a scalpel. Jenkins swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, Officer Jenkins, you took an oath to uphold the Constitution. Your partner is currently operating entirely outside of the law, driven by personal bias. If you leave this room to retrieve tools to illegally breach classified military property, you will be named as an accomplice in the federal indictment that is inevitably coming. I suggest you think very carefully about your next move. Your career and your freedom depend on it." Jenkins turned pale. He looked at the green military ID still sitting on the table. The holographic eagle caught the light. He looked at Donnelly, really looked at him. The intense focus in his eyes, the disciplined posture, the scars faintly visible on his forearms. This wasn't a street criminal. "I'm not doing it, Greg," Jenkins said, taking a step backward. "I'm not getting the cutters. I'm calling the chief." "You coward," Mitchell spat, his face turning purple with rage. "You call the chief and I'll have your badge. I'll make sure you're riding a desk for the rest of your pathetic career." "Better a desk than Leavenworth," Jenkins muttered, stepping out into the hallway and pulling out his radio. Mitchell whirled back to Donnelly, his chest heaving. "You think you've won? You haven't won anything. I can hold you here for 48 hours without charging you. I can make you miss your flight. I can make your life hell." "I am legally entitled to a phone call," Donnelly stated. "Yeah? Who are you going to call? Your fake commanding officer?" Mitchell mocked. "Go ahead. Let's see it." Mitchell walked over to the wall-mounted phone in the corner of the holding room, unlocked the receiver, and slammed it onto the metal table. He reached behind Donnelly and, with unnecessary roughness, unlocked the handcuffs, keeping a hand on his pepper spray. Donnelly rubbed his wrists slowly, the circulation painfully returning to his hands. He didn't massage the deep red grooves left by the steel. He simply flexed his fingers, ensuring his mobility was intact. He stepped toward the phone. "You get one call, make it quick, and put it on speaker," Mitchell demanded, folding his arms across his chest. "I want to hear this." "As you wish," Donnelly said. He didn't dial a lawyer. He didn't dial a bail bondsman. He didn't even dial his family. Donnelly dialed a sequence of numbers that Mitchell didn't recognize. It was a secure, unlisted routing number that connected directly to the Pentagon's encrypted switchboard, specifically the command center for Naval Special Warfare Command. The phone rang twice. A crisp, professional female voice answered. "Command center, authenticate. Tango Sierra Niner Whiskey 2, Donnelly said calmly. There was a brief pause, a soft electronic chirp, and the tone of the line shifted, becoming heavier, echoing slightly. The encryption had locked in. "Authentication confirmed. Go ahead, Chief Fisher," the voice said. Mitchell frowned, shifting his weight. That sounded awfully official. "I need an immediate patch to Admiral Edwards. Code red, in-transit intercept," Donnelly said. Mitchell let out a short, barking laugh. "An Admiral? Really? You're laying it on a bit thick, don't you think?" Donnelly ignored him, staring straight at the blank wall. 10 seconds passed in total silence. Then, a new voice came over the speaker. It was a deep, gravelly voice that carried the undeniable weight of absolute authority. It was a voice used to commanding fleets, not just men. "Fisher, where the hell are you? You missed your check-in 15 minutes ago," Admiral Allmore Edwards demanded. "Apologies, Admiral," Donnelly replied, his posture straightening instinctively even though the man couldn't see him. "I have encountered a delay at Seattle-Tacoma International." "A delay? Did you miss your connection? The debrief is scheduled for 0800 tomorrow, son. We need those package files. I did not miss my flight, sir. I have been detained by local airport police." There was a heavy, dangerous silence on the line. When Admiral Edwards spoke again, the ambient temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Detained? On what grounds?" "Suspicion of carrying contraband, sir. The arresting officer is currently demanding the keys to the secured diplomatic pouch to search it." "The hell he is!" Edwards roared, the sound making the plastic speaker on the phone rattle. "Is the package secure?" "Yes, sir. It has not been breached." "Who is the officer holding you?" Donnelly glanced at the nameplate on the stunned cop's chest. "Officer Gregory Mitchell, badge number 4278. "Put him on the line." Mitchell's heart did a strange, uncomfortable flutter in his chest. The bravado he had wielded like a club just minutes ago was suddenly evaporating. The voice on the phone didn't sound like a friend playing a prank. It sounded like a man who could summon an airstrike. Donnelly stepped back from the phone and gestured to it with an open palm. "He wants to speak with you." Mitchell swallowed dryly. He leaned over the table, trying to maintain his tough guy facade. "This is Officer Mitchell? Who am I speaking to?" "You are speaking to Admiral Allmore Edwards, Commander of United States Naval Special Warfare. You are currently holding one of my Tier 1 operators and illegally detaining highly classified military intelligence. I am going to give you exactly 5 seconds to release Chief Fisher and his property, or I am going to ruin your life." Mitchell's hands gripped the edge of the metal table. His prejudice fought a violent battle with his self-preservation. "Listen here, Admiral. I don't know what kind of scam you and your buddy are running, but this man was acting suspiciously, and his ID is fake. He's in my jurisdiction, and he's not going anywhere until I search that bag." A terrifyingly soft chuckle echoed through the speaker. It was not a sound of amusement. "Son," Admiral Edwards said, his voice deadly quiet, "you have no idea what you've just stepped into. Chief Fisher, are you still there?" "Yes, Admiral," Donnelly said. "Stand by. I am making a call." The line didn't disconnect, but there was a clicking sound as Edwards put them on a brief hold to open another line. Mitchell stood there, his bravado entirely stripped away, staring at the flashing red light on the phone. Jenkins walked back into the room, looking pale, holding his radio. "Greg," Jenkins whispered, his voice shaking. "The chief is coming down here." He sounded panicked. Before Mitchell could process that information, the speakerphone crackled back to life. "Officer Mitchell," Edwards's voice boomed. "I have just woken up the director of the FBI's Seattle Field office, and I have the chief of your police department on a secure secondary line. If that bag is touched, if Chief Fisher is not on his connecting flight in 20 minutes, I will have federal marshals descend on your precinct, arrest you for violations of the Espionage Act, and charge you with unlawful detention of a federal agent. Do I make myself absolutely clear?" Sweat, cold and clammy, finally broke out across Officer Gregory Mitchell's forehead. He stared at the flashing red light on the speakerphone as if it were a live hand grenade that had just landed on the metal table. The booming, gravelly voice of Admiral Allmore Edwards had ceased, leaving a ringing, suffocating silence in the small, windowless holding room. For a man who had spent his entire 2-decade career bullying the vulnerable and twisting the law to fit his own twisted prejudices, the sudden realization that he had cornered a federally protected apex predator was paralyzing. Mitchell looked at Donnelly Fisher, The Navy SEAL hadn't moved an inch. He wasn't smirking. He wasn't gloating. His face remained a flawless mask of tactical composure, eyes locked onto Mitchell with the chilling indifference of a man who viewed the corrupt cop not as a threat, but as a minor logistical hurdle. Before Mitchell could force his paralyzed throat to form a response, the heavy door to the substation burst open with enough force to crack the drywall. Police Chief Thomas Donovan stormed into the room, chest heaving, his face flushed a dangerous shade of crimson. Donovan was a pragmatic, hard-nosed veteran of law enforcement who spent most of his days smoothing over political issues and managing airport security protocols. He had been in the middle of a city council budget meeting when his encrypted emergency line had rung with a direct call from the Pentagon. Donovan's eyes darted frantically around the room. He saw Jenkins trembling in the corner, holding his radio like a shield. He saw Mitchell, pale and sweating, standing awkwardly near the phone. Finally, his gaze landed on Donnelly Fisher, standing tall in the center of the room, rubbing the deep red lacerations on his wrists where the steel cuffs had bitten into his skin. The heavy olive-drab duffel bag, secured with heavy brass padlocks, sat untouched by the door. "Chief Donovan," Mitchell stammered, instinctively taking a step back. "I was just conducting a routine." "Shut your damn mouth, Mitchell," Donovan roared, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. He marched forward, closing the distance between himself and his subordinate in 3 long strides. "Do you have any earthly idea what you have just done? Do you comprehend the magnitude of the catastrophic liability you have just invited upon this department?" "Chief, the suspect was acting erratic in the pre-check lane," Mitchell pleaded, his tough guy facade shattering completely. He pointed a shaking finger at Donnelly. "He was carrying an oversized baug, refused a lawful order to submit to a search, and handed me a fake military ID. I was doing my job. I was securing the terminal." Donovan looked down at the metal table. There, sitting innocuously under the harsh fluorescent lights, was the green common access card. Donovan snatched it up. He didn't need a scanner. Any law enforcement officer with half a brain and proper federal liaison training knew the security features of a Department of Defense CAC. He thumbed the microchip, checked the holographic overlays, and read the rank. "Chief Petty Officer. This is a legitimate, federally issued Tier 1 identification card, you absolute moron," Donovan hissed, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I just got off the phone with a 4-star Admiral who threatened to have the United States Marshals Service declare this precinct a hostile federal crime scene. He told me you were about to use bolt cutters on a sealed diplomatic pouch carrying classified after-action intelligence." "He doesn't look like a Navy SEAL, Chief," Mitchell blurted out, the ugly root of his prejudice laid bare in his desperation. "Look at him. Look at the way he's dressed. It's a textbook cover for a mule." Donovan stared at Mitchell in sheer disbelief. The sheer audacity of the racism, spoken aloud in front of the very man he had unlawfully detained, made the chief physically sick. Donnelly finally broke his silence. His voice was a calm, steady baritone that cut through the chaotic energy of the room. "Chief Donovan, my name is Chief Petty Officer Donnelly Fisher. I am currently operating under Title 10 active duty orders. I have a connecting flight to San Diego that boards in exactly 22 minutes. If I'm not on that plane, the chain of custody for the intelligence in my bag is broken, and a critical national security briefing at Naval Special Warfare Command will be compromised." Donovan turned to Donnelly, his demeanor shifting instantly from furious commander to desperate damage control manager. "Chief Fisher, I cannot express how profoundly sorry I am for this unacceptable breach of protocol. You are free to go, immediately." "I cannot leave just yet, Chief Donovan," Donnelly replied, his eyes flickering toward the speakerphone. My commanding officer requested to be kept on the line. Donovan swallowed hard. He stepped toward the phone, leaned in, and spoke with utmost deference. "Admiral Edwards, this is Chief of Police Thomas Donovan. I am on site. Chief Fisher is secure, his property is untouched, and he is officially released from our custody." The encrypted line crackled. "Chief Donovan," the Admiral's voice growled, radiating a cold, unforgiving authority. "I hold you personally responsible for the culture of your department. The fact that one of your men felt emboldened enough to unlawfully detain a federal operator and attempt to breach classified materials based on blatant racial profiling is a catastrophic failure of your leadership." "I agree completely, Admiral. It will be dealt with severely and immediately," Donovan promised, glaring daggers at Mitchell. "See that it is," Edwards snapped, "because I have already dispatched a federal liaison to your location to ensure my man makes his flight and to take initial statements. Fisher?" "Yes, Admiral," Donnelly said. "Get on that plane, son. I'll see you in Coronado at 0800. Edwards out." The line clicked dead. The dial tone echoed loudly in the room. Donovan slowly hung up the receiver. He turned to face Mitchell, who looked like a man standing on the gallows, watching the executioner pull the lever. "Chief, please," Mitchell begged, his voice cracking. The bravado was entirely gone, replaced by the pathetic whining of a bully who had finally picked on the wrong target. "I've got 20 years on the force. My pension, my family. It was a mistake, a misunderstanding. I'll apologize. I'll write a formal apology right now." Before Donovan could respond, the heavy steel door of the holding room swung open again. This time it wasn't a panicked police officer. Two men walked in, wearing immaculate dark suits, their expressions unreadable behind aviator sunglasses, despite being indoors. The lead man, tall with closely cropped graying hair, reached into his breast pocket and produced a leather credential wallet, flipping it open to reveal a gold shield. "Special Agent Richard Caldwell, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Seattle Field Office," the man announced, his voice smooth, professional, and utterly devoid of warmth. His partner stepped slightly to the side, positioning himself between Mitchell and the door, a silent but clear tactical maneuver. Agent Caldwell looked around the room, taking in the scene. He noted the red marks on Donnelly's wrists, the duffel bag on the floor, and the terrified posture of the two local cops. "Chief Donovan," Caldwell nodded slightly. "We received an urgent mandate from the Department of Defense regarding an attempted breach of the Espionage Act and a civil rights violation under the color of law. I am officially assuming jurisdiction of this scene." Donovan let out a long, defeated breath. "It's all yours, Agent Caldwell. The department will cooperate fully." Mitchell stumbled backward until his back hit the concrete wall. "Espionage Act? Civil rights violation? You can't be serious. I'm a cop. I have qualified immunity." Caldwell removed his sunglasses, revealing cold, steel-gray eyes that locked onto Mitchell like a targeting laser. Qualified immunity protects law enforcement officers who make reasonable mistakes in the line of duty. It does not protect officers who willfully violate federal law, illegally detain active-duty military personnel without probable cause, and attempt to unlawfully seize and destroy classified government property based on racial profiling. Caldwell pulled a small notebook from his pocket and flipped it open. "Officer Gregory Mitchell, we have already pulled the security feeds from the TSA pre-check terminal. We have audio and video of your initial interaction with Chief Fisher. You initiated a stop without reasonable articulable suspicion. You escalated to an arrest without probable cause. You ignored a valid federal identification. You threatened to destroy government property." "He refused a lawful order," Mitchell shouted, desperation making his voice shrill. "He wouldn't open the bag." "It is a federal offense for him to open that bag for an uncleared individual, which you are, Caldwell stated flatly. By attempting to force him to do so, you were attempting to compel a federal agent to commit a felony. That is obstruction of justice and a violation of Title 18 U.S.C., Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. Caldwell turned his attention to the younger officer cowering in the corner. Officer Jenkins, correct? Jenkins jolted upright, his face completely bloodless. Yes, sir. Did you participate in the physical detainment of Chief Fisher? No, sir, I swear, Jenkins stammered, his hands shaking violently. I told him not to do it. I refused to get the bolt cutters when he asked for them. I was the one who called the chief. Caldwell looked at Donnelly for confirmation. Donnelly gave a single curt nod. Officer Jenkins attempted to de-escalate the situation. He refused a direct order from his senior partner to breach the bag. Caldwell made a note in his pad. Good decision, Jenkins. It's the only reason you aren't leaving this airport in federal handcuffs today. But you will be spending the next several hours writing a very detailed sworn statement for my office. Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir, Jenkins breathed, looking as though he might collapse from sheer relief. Chief Donovan stepped up to Mitchell. His face was a mask of pure disgust. Gregory Mitchell, effective immediately, you are stripped of your police powers. You are suspended without pay, pending the outcome of this federal investigation and our own internal affairs review. Donovan held out his hand. Badge and gun. Now, Mitchell stared at the chief's open hand. His lower lip trembled. The career he had wielded as a weapon to intimidate and harass was vanishing before his eyes, stripped away in a drab concrete room. Slowly, with trembling fingers, he unclipped his heavy duty belt, letting it hit the floor with a heavy thud. He unpinned the silver shield from his chest, the badge he thought made him invincible, and placed it into Donovan's waiting palm. You're making a mistake, Mitchell whispered, tears of self-pity finally spilling over his eyelids. After 20 years. The only mistake I made was not firing you 5 years ago, when the first profiling complaints rolled in, Donovan replied coldly. Agent Caldwell, he's all yours. Caldwell turned to his partner. Detain Mr. Mitchell in the secondary interview room. Read him his Miranda rights. We'll wait for the Department of Justice prosecutors to draft the formal charging documents. Mitchell was grabbed by the arms by the second FBI agent. As he was being led out of the door, completely broken and humiliated. He looked back at Donnelly. Donnelly Fisher hadn't moved. He was calmly rolling down the sleeves of his grey Henley shirt, covering the red bruises on his wrists. He reached down and effortlessly hoisted the heavy olive-drab duffel bag over his shoulder. He didn't look angry. He didn't look vindicated. He simply looked exactly as he had an hour ago, like a professional on a mission. Chief Fisher, Agent Caldwell said, his tone softening considerably, taking on an edge of profound respect. My apologies for the delay. Your flight is currently holding at the gate by federal order. We have a golf cart waiting outside to take you directly through the tarmac access doors. You will not miss your flight. Thank you, Agent Caldwell, Donnelly said, his voice level. I appreciate the quick response. It's the least we could do, Chief. Thank you for your service and for keeping your cool today. 99% of guys would have put that idiot through a wall. A faint ghost of a smile touched Donnelly's lips. The thought crossed my mind. But the intel takes priority. Donnelly walked out of the holding room, flanked by Chief Donovan and Agent Caldwell. As he passed the secondary interview room, he could hear the muffled, pathetic sobs of Gregory Mitchell as his Miranda rights were read to him. Donnelly didn't even turn his head. Mitchell was no longer a threat. He was just a footnote in a mission report, a minor obstacle that had been efficiently neutralized by the chain of command. Donnelly stepped onto the waiting golf cart, the cool Seattle air rushing past him as they sped down the restricted access corridors of the airport. The chaos of the terminal was left behind, replaced by the roar of jet engines on the tarmac. As he climbed the metal stairs to the boarding door of his commercial flight, a flight attendant stood waiting, holding the door open with a wide, nervous smile. He found his seat, stowed his secure bag under the seat in front of him, and finally, for the first time in 3 days, allowed himself to close his eyes. He pictured his 6-year-old daughter, Chloe, and the birthday cake waiting for him in San Diego. The mission was almost over. He was finally going home. Meanwhile, back in the windowless interrogation room, the nightmare for a corrupt, racist ex-cop was just beginning. The descent into San Diego International Airport was a stark contrast to the gray, rain-slicked runways of Seattle. Golden Southern California morning light flooded the cabin of the commercial airliner, casting a warm glow over the passengers as the wheels touched down with a smooth jolt. For Chief Petty Officer Donnelly Fisher, the shift in climate mirrored the internal shift he was actively forcing upon his own mind. He was transitioning out of the hyper-vigilant combat mindset that had kept him alive for the past 9 months, attempting to downshift into the role of a father and a husband. But first, the mission had to be officially closed. A black, government-issued Chevrolet Suburban was idling on the tarmac the moment Donnelly descended the air stairs. 2 heavily armed naval security personnel stood by the vehicle, offering crisp salutes as Donnelly approached. He returned the salute effortlessly, his heavy olive-drab duffel bag still slung securely over his shoulder. The drive over the Coronado Bridge was silent, the sparkling blue expanse of the San Diego Bay serving as a quiet reminder of what he had been fighting to protect. At exactly 07:45, Donnelly walked through the heavily fortified double doors of Naval Special Warfare Command. The air conditioning was freezing, the corridors smelling faintly of floor wax and ozone from the server rooms. He bypassed the standard security checkpoints. His presence was already anticipated at the highest levels of the building. He was escorted directly into the secured briefing room known as the Vault. Sitting at the head of a long, polished mahogany table was Admiral Allmore Edwards. The 4-star Admiral looked exactly as he sounded on the phone. An imposing, weathered force of nature with iron-gray hair, a face carved from granite, and eyes that missed absolutely nothing. Flanking him were 3 senior intelligence analysts and a captain from the Judge Advocate General's Corps. "Chief Fisher," Admiral Edwards said, standing up. He extended a massive, calloused hand. Donnelly set the heavy bag down and shook the Admiral's hand firmly. "Morning, Admiral. Package is secure and uncompromised." Donnelly reached into his pocket, produced a small, keycard-activated lockbox, retrieved the physical brass keys, and unlocked the heavy padlocks on the duffel. From inside the canvas bag, he pulled a black, hardened Pelican case. He placed it on the mahogany table, entered a 12-digit alphanumeric sequence on the biometric lock, and pressed his thumb to the scanner. The case hissed as the vacuum seal broke. Inside were 3 encrypted hard drives and 2 thick, red-banded dossiers detailing the operational success of a highly classified, multinational strike against a terror syndicate's financial hub. It was intelligence that would disrupt global threat networks for the next decade. Edwards looked at the contents, then looked up at Donnelly, his stern expression softening just a fraction. "You did exceptional work over there, Donnelly. The Joint Chiefs are reviewing the preliminary data now. This is a massive win." "Thank you, sir. The team performed flawlessly," Donnelly replied, habitually deflecting the praise to his men still downrange. Edwards dismissed the analysts with a nod, waiting until the heavy steel doors sealed shut behind them before leaning back in his chair. He stared intently at the red, raw bruising still visible around Donnelly's wrists. "I read the preliminary flash report from the FBI field office in Seattle," Edwards said, his voice dropping to a low rumble. Agent Caldwell stated that the local officer was highly aggressive, unprofessional, and entirely out of bounds. He also noted your absolute restraint. "It was a tactical calculation, Admiral," Donnelly said evenly. "Engaging in a physical altercation with a law enforcement officer, even an unlawful one, would have resulted in an immediate lockdown. Local police would have swarmed the terminal. The bag would have been seized as evidence in a domestic assault case. The intelligence would have been compromised and the timeline destroyed. Compliance under protest was the only viable operational choice." Edwards let out a short, admiring huff of breath. "A tactical calculation. Most men, even most operators in this building, would have snapped that arrogant cop's arm in 3 places the moment those cuffs came out. You have the patience of a saint, Chief, and because of that patience, the FBI is going to dismantle that officer's life piece by piece, completely by the book." "Justice has its own timeline, sir," Donnelly replied softly. "I just wanted to get home." Edwards smiled, a genuine warm expression that few people ever saw. "Go home, Donnelly. Stand down. You have 30 days of mandatory leave starting right now. Tell Chloe I said happy birthday." "I will, sir. Thank you." 45 minutes later, Donnelly pulled his personal truck into the driveway of his suburban home in Chula Vista. The front lawn was littered with brightly colored balloons, and a large hand-painted banner hung over the garage door. "Welcome home, Daddy and Happy. 6th birthday, Chloe." Donnelly killed the engine. He sat in the cab for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel, closing his eyes, and taking a deep, shuddering breath. The desert, the gunfire, the oppressive heat, the racist cop, the metal handcuffs. He visualized packing them all into a mental box, locking it and shoving it to the darkest corner of his mind. He opened his eyes. He was just Donnelly now. He stepped out of the truck and walked to the front door, slipping his key into the lock. He didn't even have the door fully pushed open before a high-pitched scream of pure joy shattered the quiet of the house. "Daddy!" A small blur of a pink princess dress and wildly curly hair launched across the hardwood floor. Donnelly dropped to his knees, throwing his arms open just in time to catch his daughter, Chloe, as she barreled into his chest. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling the scent of vanilla frosting and childhood innocence. The crushing weight of the past 9 months instantly evaporated. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Donnelly choked out, his voice thick with emotion, holding her so tightly he was afraid she might disappear. "You made it. You promised you'd make it," Chloe squealed, wrapping her small arms around his thick neck. Standing in the hallway, wiping tears from her eyes, was his wife, Sarah. She looked at the exhaustion etched into the lines of his face, the dark circles under his eyes, and the faint, fresh bruises on his wrists. She didn't ask about the bruises. Being married to a Tier 1 operator meant knowing when to ask questions and when to simply offer comfort. Sarah walked over and wrapped her arms around both of them, kissing the top of Donnelly's head. "Welcome home, sailor," she whispered. "It's good to be home," Donnelly replied, looking at his family. The holding cell in Seattle felt like it belonged to a different universe. He had won the only battle that truly mattered today. 6 months later, the damp, gray chill of a Seattle winter battered the stone exterior of the United States District Court for the Western District of Washington. Inside courtroom 4B, the atmosphere was equally cold and unforgiving. Gregory Mitchell sat at the defense table, barely recognizable from the puffed-up, aggressive bully who had stalked the terminals of SeaTac Airport. The former police officer had lost 30 pounds. His once meticulously groomed hair was thinning and unkempt, and the cheap grey suit he wore hung loosely on his diminished frame. His hands, which had so eagerly slapped handcuffs onto a federal agent, trembled uncontrollably on the polished wooden table. There was no qualified immunity. There was no police union protection. The moment the FBI and the Department of Justice had taken the reins, Mitchell's former allies had scattered like roaches in the light. Police Chief Thomas Donovan had held a highly publicized press conference the day after the incident, publicly condemning Mitchell's actions, announcing Mitchell's immediate termination, and initiating a sweeping departmental review of profiling practices. The federal indictment handed down by the grand jury was devastating. Mitchell was charged with 2 felony counts under 18 U.S.C. Paragraph 242, deprivation of rights under color of law, and 1 count of attempted obstruction of national security operations. Lead prosecutor William Hayes, a sharp, relentless attorney with a reputation for destroying corrupt officials, stood before the jury box. The trial had lasted only 4 days. It hadn't needed to be longer. The evidence was an insurmountable mountain. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Hayes began, his voice echoing in the quiet courtroom during his closing statement. "The defense has attempted to paint this as a simple misunderstanding. A veteran officer being overly cautious in a post-9/11 world. But you have seen the airport security footage. You have heard the pristine, high-definition audio from the TSA checkpoint. You have heard the testimony of Officer Brian Jenkins." Hayes walked over to the evidence table and pointed to a transcript of the audio. "You heard the defendant refer to Chief Petty Officer Donnelly Fisher as boy. You heard him mock a federally issued, highly secure military identification card as a fake without ever attempting to scan it. You heard him blatantly state that a black man in a gray shirt couldn't possibly be a Navy SEAL carrying classified information." Hayes turned and locked eyes with Mitchell, who stared at the floor, unable to meet the prosecutor's gaze. This was not caution. This was not police work, Hayes thundered, his voice ringing with righteous indignation. This was a grotesque display of racial prejudice, wielded by a man given a badge and a gun, who believed those tools made him a king. Gregory Mitchell did not care about the law. He cared about dominance. He unlawfully detained an American hero, ignored federal warnings, and nearly compromised a highly sensitive, classified military operation simply because Chief Fisher didn't fit his bigoted, narrow-minded view of what a patriot looks like. Hayes walked back to the center of the room. "Chief Fisher is not here today. He is not here because he is currently deployed, once again putting his life on the line in a hostile environment so that men like Gregory Mitchell can sleep soundly in their beds. Chief Fisher exercised supernatural restraint on that day. It is now your turn to exercise justice. Find the defendant guilty on all charges." The jury deliberations took less than 3 hours. When the verdict was read, Mitchell collapsed back into his chair, burying his face in his hands as quiet sobs racked his body. Guilty on all counts. 2 weeks later, the sentencing hearing was presided over by the Honorable Judge Richard Thompson. Judge Thompson was known for his stern demeanor and his absolute intolerance for public corruption. Mitchell stood before the bench, flanked by his utterly defeated public defender. "Mr. Mitchell," Judge Thompson began, looking down over his reading glasses, his expression one of profound disgust. "In my 20 years on the federal bench, I have rarely seen a case of such blatant, arrogant abuse of power. You targeted a decorated serviceman based entirely on the color of his skin. You ignored protocol, you ignored the law, and you threatened to destroy classified government property to satisfy your own fragile ego." Mitchell openly wept, his voice barely a whisper. "Your Honor, I'm sorry. I lost everything. My wife left me. My pension is gone. Please, show mercy." "Mercy." Judge Thompson's voice was as hard as flint. You showed no mercy to the citizens you swore to protect. You weaponized the authority granted to you by the state to terrorize the innocent. Law enforcement officers are the shield of society, Mr. Mitchell. But when the shield becomes a weapon against the people, the courts must act as the hammer. Judge Thompson struck his gavel against the sounding block. The sharp crack echoed like a gunshot. Gregory Mitchell, I hereby sentence you to 96 months in federal prison, to be followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are remanded immediately to the custody of the United States Marshals. 2 massive stone-faced U.S. Marshals stepped forward. They grabbed Mitchell by the arms, pulling his hands behind his back. As the heavy steel handcuffs ratcheted down onto Mitchell's wrists, the exact same sensation he had so callously inflicted upon Donnelly Fisher just months prior. Mitchell let out a wail of despair. He was dragged out of the courtroom, his legacy destroyed, his freedom stripped away, destined to spend the next 8 years of his life in a federal penitentiary, surrounded by the very people he had spent his career looking down upon. Thousands of miles away, on a classified training range in the harsh terrain of the Nevada desert, Chief Petty Officer Donnelly Fisher lay in the prone position on a rocky ridgeline. He peered through the high-powered scope of his sniper rifle, his breathing slow, steady, and perfectly controlled. The desert wind howled around him, but in his mind there was only utter silence and perfect focus. He didn't know that the gavel had just fallen in Seattle. He didn't know that the racist cop who had tried to ruin his life was currently being loaded into a prison transport van. And if he had known, he wouldn't have cared. Donnelly adjusted his windage dial, exhaled completely, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle roared, sending a round flawlessly through the center of a steel target, 1,000 yards away. The mission continued. The true professionals kept moving forward, leaving the broken, corrupt men in the dust of history. What an incredibly satisfying conclusion. Donnelly's unbreakable discipline not only protected crucial national security intelligence, but allowed the justice system to absolutely dismantle a corrupt, racist bully. Seeing Gregory Mitchell face the ultimate consequences and lose everything he held dear proves that nobody is above the law. If you loved watching justice served cold and respect the insane restraint of our military heroes, please like this video, share it with anyone who loves a powerful real-life drama, and subscribe to the channel for more epic, justice-driven stories. What did you think of the judge's final words? Let us know in the comments.